Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 34 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. Chris Feeney's with me. Chris, how's it going?
It's going well. Going well. We were chatting earlier. It's been auto repair week, whether I liked it or not.
So let's tie that into IGEL and the future of automobiles, right? What if you could just grab a car that was on your street, hop in and drive it, and you never had to worry about flat tires and oil changes and all that stuff again? If you had the idea of like hoteling, like we have here at XenTegra, and you guys probably have, as well as BYOD or consume whatever device is in front of you type stuff, and somebody else comes and takes care of the one you left behind, kind of like the scooters and stuff you have on the streets in major cities.
Not a bad idea. In fact, I dare say there's been attempts at this, but the idea that maybe you get like a UD pocket kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Just walk around. And I think there was a car, I remember hearing about this Zip car, maybe was a similar kind of concept. You could rent the car out and go find it in a parking spot and walk up, and you get some kind of proximity card to unlock the door or whatever, and then off you drive it for whatever time, and then you turn it back in or something.
I
So
think that happens in places like New York and New Jersey. I was in Hoboken a year or so ago, and we just walked down the street and picked up a car, and key was in it, and we dropped it back off and never interacted with a single person.
yeah, I remember hearing. We had an SC I used to work with. He came back into the States to live, and he was in New York and didn't have a car. But that he was telling me about the zip car thing, because we were looking at one of his badges or something. I was like, "What in the world is zip car?" And we started talking, and I was like, "Okay, I don't understand everything about this, but it seems kind of cool. I mean, if you only need a car for 2 hours, whatever, or 30 minutes, what
What do
have you."
you what do you think? And I already have an opinion, but I want to hear yours. What do you think the biggest prohibitor in that model currently is? What's preventing that model from taking off tomorrow?
I mean, my first thought is insurance.
Yeah, that can be fixed with money.
Certainly. Uh, Maybe people that don't know how to drive.
Nope. Yeah, you may be right. You could be totally right on everything you're saying, and I'm totally wrong. I think the problem with that model is marketing.
Certainly. I mean, it's a disruptive sort of thing, just like Uber and all these other things that popped out of nowhere in the last decade plus. Uh,
But I don't think the problem is Zipcar's marketing. I think it's the marketing that the big brands have done for all these years, teaching all of us that we need to have our own cars that we own and possess. For example, I literally have 6 cars. I have 4 kids, 3 of them drive. My wife has a car. I have like 3 cars, nothing special, old cars. But uh, owning an automobile in the United States, at least, is part of being an American.
yeah, I was thinking about right before you said that. We are conditioned. I mean, the fact that my friend came back, he was over in the UK, and then he came back in, and he chose not to own a car in New York City. And I can understand many reasons why. But the idea that I got to have a car, I'm like, well, gosh, how much money is he actually saving by not having a car? And he can use transit or this new thing, Zip car.
Yeah.
Uh, there are moments when you definitely want to have a car, but then you have moments like last night when I was driving back from Costco after getting gas, when I hit something punctured the tire before I was like, literally, like I could see the entrance to our subdivision up
Yeah.
ahead, but I couldn't get there because I had to pull off the road. The tire was flat, and I'm like, I'm gonna do something bad if I don't do this. So anyways,
Maybe the future is like a hybrid model where you don't own the car, but you have access to the car. Like you pay a lease and you get the car, and something goes wrong with it, you just swap it out. I think there's elements of that, which the big brands, Ford, General Motors, you name it, are going to get behind. And all of a sudden they've got a subscription based business that they don't currently have right now. They rely on, finance charges and maintenance. Imagine when they get to a world where subscription, you pay $1,000 a month, but you have a carefree driving experience that allows you to have a truck when you need it, a sports car when you need it, or sedan when you want it. That's the future of all this. And I think I'm going to tie this into what we're talking about here. I think the cloud first model and the education, higher education world that we're going to talk about in our blog here in a second, I think those folks are going to be lined up perfectly for that type of marketing effort. And they're going to buy into, I'll pay more, but I'll have the newest, latest thing all the time.
Yeah, there's so much there to unpack. Um, my dad worked in the auto industry for years, and so many things there that in a disruptive scenario would generally, I mean, uh, just cascading effect, right? And education. I mean, how many? I mean, even now, like I mean, the fact that you could take an online class at the university level, or be an online student and get your MBA or something like that. I mean, just the thought of that 20 years ago was not around, but a lot of universities have made a killing just by offering online classes with online enrollments, well above what they actually have for actually on campus type of student body. So a lot to talk about there.
I think you just hit on the key of it all. If you can make money doing it, all of a sudden it will make sense.
Right. And then you come to visit when we were doing college visits. I remember we went to this one school, to be left unnamed, and I didn't know what to expect. And I was blown away by all the new facilities. I mean, very impressive when you get there, all this great stuff. And then I'm sitting there thinking, how in the world? I mean, it was like they had like 100,000 online students, paying whatever reduced, but all that money allowed them to be able to invest into the actual facilities on site. And you know, here they are 10 years plus into that model, and
Was it a
and it's
private
worked
school
really
or
well.
public school?
No, it's let me think. Is it public? Private? I think it's public. It's private. No, I think it was maybe a bit private, I guess.
So humor me for a minute. What if the people running that private school and doing the online stuff and reinvesting back into the physical facilities of the private school, what if their real goal was to buy up all the real estate around the school, and their real goal was to drive real estate values for the land that they owned? What
Well,
if?
that actually did happen. Then so it was so funny you mentioned that because across the way, there's a shopping center that was owned in part by the university. So the leases and all the stuff for the Subways of the world, the Pizza Huts or whatever was over there.
Yep.
It was all certainly the property values went up. That's for
Owned by the
sure.
university or leased by the university, but actually physically owned by the backers of the university, the business guy behind it all.
I think it was something like that. I don't have the full story. I just remember it was university owned the leases or something like that. But it was clearly, you know, when they had the chance, they bought it up and then they just continued to lease it out. But uh, I don't know if that was part of their grand scheme, but
So
it was.
there's a school here in North Carolina, I won't name it, that I know for a fact the guy, rich business guy, got involved with. He's elevating the school through marketing and other things, but he's buying up all the property around the school. He will more than get his money back for what he's doing.
No doubt. You went to NC State. I mean, look what they've done on Hillsborough. I mean, up and down that whole facility. It used to be. I've been here for 20 years in Raleigh, and
But
I mean,
that's a little different because that's the public side doing what's raising property values, and there's a bunch of people participating in that. What I'm talking about here is just one individual who buys the school or takes control of the school and then buys all the property around it, tells the community he's doing a good service. What he's really doing is lining himself up to make a whole bunch of money someday.
you know, 3 words: follow the money.
Follow the money.
There, follow the money. Nobody works for free, generally speaking.
Well, and we talk about all that with the idea that higher education, even K through 12, but higher education, especially on the public, private side and K through 12, can be really big money. People all over the world will put money into education because that's a great place to put money. Yes. At the same time, it's a great place to make money. I think what we're talking about here today is this blog by Anit Nichani. Did I say Anit's last name right? Close?
Yes.
From Educause conference that we were both, or I was at last week with IGEL. Educause 2021, discover flexible, secure, and remote learning with IGEL. And I think that's a huge part of the higher education story when it comes to using Linux to access hosted technologies, whether it's SaaS based or desktop based or Win x86 based or all the above, all at the same time, and doing it without concern for the endpoint and the risk that you're putting that user in and the system in remotely accessing it.
Yeah. When you think about all the things that are sort of involved here, I mean, you've got eh, where do you go to access your content or do your homework or assignments or whatever? I know at our school, or kids went to school, my wife teaches now. Um, they're, I would say they're where the teachers put their assignments, stuff like that. It's a web page. They log into a browser and then they do their work out of there. And then they also have migrated to MS Teams and Office, and where they used to have sort of disparate systems like Box, for example, for storage, but now they're just using OneDrive as part of their education. I'm sure subscription that they've got with M365, and but also commonality across in a K through 12 environment, but not necessarily K through 12. But certainly, commonality with from a user experience. Like, where do you go? Just plug this in, do this, and also mitigating a lot of risk of I couldn't get to my assignment because my machine got hacked or whatever. Well, that's not a problem. We're going to help you out there. Something like that. So, but you, just out of curious, how was the conference? Pretty well attended? What do you how was it?
So look, I go to these things for two reasons. One, to talk to potential customers, potential customer partners is how I would say it. I also talk to vendor partners. The vendor partner thing was great. I will say that in this world of remote work, the Citrix slash VMware slash Microsoft slash cloud computing story for hybrid rights and security, some of the things we're going to talk about here, and the IGEL story that goes along with that, and others like Nutanix, who we were with. Those things are very, very valuable right now. So the conference was good enough. And when you put it in the context of coming out of the pandemic and people running around telling you how to put a mask on, people who couldn't travel for whatever reason, it was okay from a customer perspective. But for a chance to go talk to other vendors and get face to face with them and challenge each other on how to work together better, it was really good.
Mm-hmm.
I'd give it an A for effort and a C for actual execution. Maybe even a C minus, but coming out of where we're coming out of, let's get our C and move on.
Yeah. Well, good. I honestly I haven't sold a ton into higher ed, so as far as visibility into what those environments are using from that workspace, is it heavily Citrix? Is it VMware? Is it Microsoft? Is it transitioning? Have they adopted the cloud? That type of thing. Have you? What did you generally take from that and the conversations that you had?
I think the answer to what you just said is yes, all the above, right? They've got all the challenges and more of corporate America, longer sales cycles more than likely, but certainly long-term viability and long-term partnerships for people like IGEL and XenTegra.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think you guys had a joint customer in Orange County near Chapel Hill.
We do, yes.
And I remember at the Durham Bulls game, I was talking with a guy that used to work there, and just kind of getting a sense of some of the things that he did. Like in a room where you come in, you got a bunch of computers, and they would set up, do a teaching, and then be able to completely have the teacher have the ability to just completely reset everything back to where it was, so the next class comes in and can repeat essentially the same thing. So I think that's a nice use case where IGEL, given some of the management capabilities, can give the teacher the flexibility to be able to have some control over what's going on in the classroom, shadow the students as they're working on assignments in class or whatever, or just walk over, what have you, and then, just reset everything back to where it was, so the next class or the next teacher can do what they need to do. So
you said the key word there. They had a guy, right? One guy who got it, who really understood how to put it all together, had the vision for it. Well, that guy's not there anymore. And so now you have a team that really wants to kind of somewhat take path of least resistance, get through the next couple of years, retire some of these challenges that they can kind of overlook until they reach that retirement goal. It's a challenge for us because it's a longer sales cycle in higher education in general. But they really commit to what they do once they commit to it. it's just a challenge making sure that you get the education out way early so that 3 years from now, as they're trying to figure out how they're going to steer their ship, they have these technologies in their purview and know how to leverage them, use them, execute, be successful with them.
Yeah, and certainly figuring out how to use all the tools in the shed.
As you know, Chris, we've started XenTegra Gov, and I told the guys this morning, guys, you got 5 years to figure this thing out, because these long-term partner relationships you can have with state and local government, federal government, education customers, these are long-term lasting things, because those people don't leave those organizations very often. So I'm in no hurry to form these relationships and partnerships. I want to do it as fast as possible, but the investment long-term will more than pay for itself in a true partnering effort with those types of customers.
No doubt. No doubt. I think I saw the similar thing in federal. You work with somebody and then they just kind of stay, either if they're with the contractor, they just maybe, switch to a different contract, but their end customers is still the same, because that contractor won the new contract and they were already there, and they just kind of assume and take over. So there's not a lot of movement, or if they do move, they always show up somewhere else. Yep. And they, similar like a CAO might go to some new place and be like, I'm going to bring the technologies I was successful with. And then they end up calling up their vendor friends or whatever and say, hey, I got an opportunity here I'd like to bring you in on. And they just sort of rinse, wash, repeat. So
for me, that's an easy conversation, because my ownership as XenTegra gets it, because I don't have ownership, right? It's us, it's myself and others. We get it's a long-term game. Where I think this industry struggles is when they deal with corporations that have a quarterly objective and don't have time to spend long sales cycles educating and advising and partnering with government entities, including higher and K through 12 education.
Yeah, it is a long game in some of these public sector type areas, because generally what they're testing now or investigating is going to be put into a budget request for next year or whenever that comes up. And so it's very difficult to say, hey, when are they going to, when are they done testing? When are they going to buy? It's like, especially if it's a disruptive type approach, similar to obviously what IGEL offers in, repurposing or replacing, new use cases, all these different things. A company in this blog, there is a really nice, our product marketing team does a lot of these infographics, and they're just, bite-sized chunks that kind of get the point across in a very succinct manner. And just, there's a link to it there about middle of the way down, but it kind of summarizes very well some of the challenges that you face in the education environment in particular, but then where IGEL can kind of bring the solutions together. I think everybody's familiar with remote learning, for example. That was not new. It's just because of the pandemic. It was new to a lot of folks that weren't used to that type of experience.
It became the normal for almost everybody.
It did. It had to. Certainly there was a ton of adjustment, and obviously the long-term effects of something like that on education, students, teachers, staff, all these things. I'm sure research will be coming out whether the benefits are pro, con. I think it's nice to have that flexibility, but also know how to best use it, and also that it's a great user experience at the end of the day. And so if it's not, you get the frustration of if it's in K through 12 environment, parents that are frustrated because their kids are having a hard time keeping up with class or getting assignments or whatever. And so if it's higher ed, obviously, parents aren't necessarily hovering, in most of the cases, but, students being able to get their stuff done in a reliable way, and also have that flexibility, and if they are in an online class and they just want to do it in their dorm, they can go to the coffee shop or what have you, knowing that they've got some technology that allows them to get to that workspace very easily is crucial. And they don't have to worry about being on some coffee shop Wi-Fi, So Um, and obviously, some of the other security concerns, right? I mean, being able to go in and change somebody's grades, for example, while that's not really a purview of IGEL, there are some concerns there, obviously, with protecting that data that they're interacting with. And, I think a big mantra certainly is migrating a lot of that into a cloud-based environment and then providing remote computing to get to it. So certainly for those that are listening, if you are working in higher ed or K through 12, and you've seen some challenges there, certainly it'd be interesting to see how organizations have been attacking them. Has it been the status quo? Just go out and buy laptops, or tell the students to go get laptop X, Y, and Z. I don't know. I'm thinking out loud here, but just different ways and approaches that I've seen.
Let's use the blog to talk through a couple things. I mean, it talks about the benefits of remote learning. I think, right? These are these 5 bullets here. A more immersive and fulfilling student computing experience, more secure and protected computing assets and operations, improved staff and student productivity, enhanced connection for centers of learning, delivery of customized digital workspaces on demand. Are those the benefits of this digitized learning world? Are those the ones you would highlight?
I think so. I mean, taking them from top to bottom there, immersive, fulfilling student computing experience. Having a platform that you can, leverage and get to educational environments. Maybe it's through a virtual desktop or virtual apps or what have you, but having that consistency. And certainly devices that can allow for that, whether it's unified comms or audio video and that type of thing, but having a standard or somewhat of a standard that can do that. Obviously, the one right below that, more secure and protected, that's pretty obvious in the light of the cyber attacks that we just live with in a sense. But I think that third bullet, improves staff and student productivity, by taking some of that complexity out of the arena, putting your workspaces into a common area and then providing a common way to access them from anywhere, in the flexibility, whether it's from a laptop, a desktop, or being able to go into an area where it's like a hoteling thing and just find a device, pull it up, because it might be running IGEL, and just access that same environment and not have to worry about, I forgot my laptop. That's okay. Just grab one of these machines and you're good to go. And on demand, right? So that switch to, we're going to now introduce something new, and that could be as simple as, okay, push out that icon to the IGEL device, and that happens to take them to a new website or a new digital workspace from Microsoft, Citrix, VMware, what have you.
Right.
So tremendous benefits, certainly. I mean, just the same ones that you'd see in other industries, but more, specifically to higher ed. I kind of look at it as, what do they need to get to do their work, whether that's writing papers or taking tests or whatever, and how can you align that into what IGEL can offer from just the endpoint perspective, obviously leveraging a lot of these other technologies.
Right. And highlighting something I don't think we've talked about here is the fact that you guys now include a Chromium based browser in the operating system, and all of a sudden, especially in higher education, some high percentage of what they do shows up in the mainstream operating system as enabled, that plus an internet connection, and now you're in business.
Mm-hmm. And one thing that is mentioned there is the management costs. Being able to not have an army of people that require to be able to manage these devices. There's tremendous productivity savings there. And in a dispersed campus, you could, if it's updating devices or whatever, I mean, you could do that knowing when those devices will be offline, in the sense of no classes taking place, scheduled tasks and updates, and then finding out, did everything go smoothly, and that type of thing. So there's certainly opportunities to just keep the things maintained over the course of, school year, but also not require a ton of human resources, I guess is probably the best way to be able to maintain something like that.
That's a huge part of IT management is the endpoints. And if we can make that as simple as possible and controlled and, leaner and secure all at the same time. Let's face it, Microsoft has done great things with their Windows operating system, but there's so much of it. Like it's a very complicated and capable operating system, but there's a lot to manage and a lot of attack vector there and a lot of things that can go wrong. A lot of applications that can perform badly or insecurely. If we can limit that to things that are delivered real time and things that we can control back in the data center, a lot of IT management just got simplified.
Yeah. And I think, really kind of hitting upon several of these things that are talked about in bits and pieces in the article, but also in that infographic, we talked about earlier, just sort of the long game, the budget pressures, especially if it's a public education where oftentimes the budget is being passed by the legislature or the county government or whatever and being able to say, I know I've got, I don't know, XXYZ number to spend with, but what can I do if I've got existing assets that I don't need to replace? I think that's probably the biggest one is just doing from when we grew up, Andy, I think, computers had started to make their way into the classroom or had labs at least. By the time we got to college, email for me at least was starting to emerge and became certainly the norm, but also more assets around campus to be able to walk up and log in and check something or whatever.
So Chris, when I was a freshman, all my labs were based on Unix machines and we did design work. By the time I graduated 5 years later, everything was Windows based and we had the Office suite on every machine and every lab. It was massive difference in the way technology was consumed and available.
Yeah, I would concur with what I saw. Started off with Pine Mail. Anyone remembers that? It was very much black screen, green letters, that type of thing. And then by the time I finished, I was browsing the web with, I don't know, I think it was, what was one of those old browsers that no longer exists? Precursor to Internet Explorer, something I can't remember. But anyways, the emergence of yahoo.com and that type of thing. Mm-hmm. But
and how legacy does that sound to talk about yahoo.com being revolutionary? Now all I get out of that is my email and a bunch of marketing that tries to influence my thoughts.
Yeah. Well, I just, the lift and shift. I remember first time I ever saw Google, I walked past somebody's computer and I didn't see a bunch of pictures and ads and stuff like that. I saw this blank page with this thing, Google. I was like, what is that?
Yeah.
So
purpose-built search engine page that is in many ways taken over what we do based on the results, not on the landing page. Think about that.
Yeah. I'll be able to find it faster than you can blink.
That's right.
But, just look at, there's one last thing I just want to say. So I remember I had a small project with a local here in Wake Forest. It was a small university, not Wake Forest University, but here in, I think, Wake County, essentially. And we completely we updated all of their IT equipment, at least on the back end, put in Windows environments, whole rack of servers, IBM hardware and that type of thing. But to see them ultimately kind of expand, but then have to live with this stuff and just maintain it, especially on the back end computers. They never really touched the endpoints as much, but I think about, the way things were set up. I mean, to be able to maintain that or do, when lighter times of the year, maybe summer school, perhaps, being able to have time to either, make those changes, introduce new things, maintain some of that equipment even longer than before until you're ready to actually shift that out with new hardware. There's a lot of options available when you're considering, doing more with less. So anyway,
And in today's world of security and hybrid work, we have to try to do more with less. I think that's a great way to kind of phrase it. And where cloud delivery services, whether it's a virtual desktop or a SaaS app, or whether it's your identity management, all those things coming together, because remember, it's not cloud, it's clouds. All those things come together and be consumable from an endpoint that's safe and secure, but yet usable. That's really the IGEL story as it relates to all this.
Yeah. If only I could have had a cloud delivered tire helper last night. I jokingly say that. It was actually a mobile experience that was honestly not that bad. The only bad problem was just waiting for somebody to come and help me, as my car was, I wasn't perfectly flat, and I had the jack on a basically grass. So as I was lifting up, several thousand pounds of vehicle, I was like, I hope it just doesn't start to sink. So I got it up enough to, get it going. But anyways, so
I don't know why you just don't keep a rollback as well.
I looked around. I was like, all right, is there a rock? I had the emergency brake on. I was just trying to figure out, all right, I don't want this thing kind of leaning back. Is it? But thankfully, the guy had, I would say, a NASCAR type jack. Yeah. He just said, "Larry, let me help you out there." Yeah.
And that's
so having the right tools.
I grew up with a house that had 3 of those jacks, right? We had race cars, and now I barely have a jack at all in my current modern day house. And is that an indictment on how my life has changed, or is it an indictment of how times have changed? And I just, I don't need to keep jacks like that around. I don't have a 3,000 square foot shop anymore. I'm lucky to have a 2-car garage that I can get my stuff in and out of. Things changed, and I think I've changed with the times. And sometimes I wish I still had that house out in the country with a big garage. But that takes us back to this concept around IGEL and having technologies that allow us to adapt with the changing times, including these cloud delivery services that are they've already have, but they're going to continue to take over what technology looks like across all organizations, and in this case, higher education.
Yeah. There's certainly opportunities, certainly proven models out there for those that might be listening that are in higher education. Certainly, I think more than anything, have a conversation. How are you using technology? I guarantee you there are ways that can be done to simplify things, versus the status quo. So certainly talk to our friends at XenTegra about that and find out if you're using Citrix, for example, is there an opportunity to make things a little bit more simple or provide a much better user experience overall in the end of the day. So I'd love you to think about IGEL.
We'll be back next week with Seb, and we'll jump into another more technical podcast. But again, the goal here is to have a technical podcast and have more of a conversation business podcast. And that's what we've covered here today around higher education and where IGEL fits into that on the heels of Educause.
Indeed it is. So thanks for your time, Andy.
A quick thing. I mean, not that it matters for our listeners, but for you and I, the Citrix is going to be having their sales kickoff, which is kind of an industry type of get together in January. I'm 95% certain it's going to be in person. So for those listening that are going to be there, we're going to be hosting a big party on Monday night, the 10th. So look forward to seeing our industry friends in mass again, not in mask, but in mass again. Maybe in mask. We'll see. We'll see what happens between now and then. But looking forward to seeing folks again and having some great conversations and getting execution happening on the heels of the evolution of the need that we've talked about here around hybrid work, remote learning, security, all those things.
And we will be there to join you. So looking forward to that, kicking off the year in good old Nashville, Tennessee.
All right, sir. Appreciate the time.
Yeah, thanks, Andy.